maybe this is a small tangent, but
Sure.
let me ask you on the topic of academia. You're kind of I mean, we talked about Jordan Peterson. There's a lot of sort of renegade type of thinkers, certainly in psychology, but it applies in all disciplines. Of what are your thoughts about academia being a place to harbor people like yourself, that people who think
Mhm.
deeply about things, who are not constrained by sort of the who I mean, I don't think you're quite controversial,
No, not really.
but you are a person who thinks deeply about things, and it feels like academia can sometimes stifle that.
I think so. So my concern right now, Lex, for young scholars is that um, the restrictions and expectations are such that it's highly unlikely that anybody will do anything of great value or innovation except for, and this is not a bad thing, but stepwise improvement of existing paradigms. So in simple English, I went to Princeton for a job interview 40 years ago, and they're like, what are you going to do if we give you a job? And I'm like, I don't know. I want to think about it and read. Um, and I saw that interview was over. The window of
Yeah.
opportunity shut in my face, and they actually called my mentors, and they're like, "What are you doing? Tell this guy to buy some pants." I had hair down to my waist. Also, he's like,
Nice.
"This guy looks like Charles Manson and Jesus." But uh, the the expectation is that you come to a post, you start publishing so that you can get grants.
That's certainly true, but there's also kind of a behavioral thing. You said like long hair. There's there's a certain style of the way you're supposed to behave. For example, like I'm wearing a suit. It sounds it sounds weird, but I feel comfortable in this. I wore it like when I was teaching at MIT. I wore it.
Sure.
I wore it to meetings and so on. The different, sometimes a blue and red tie, but like that was an outsider thing to do at MIT. So like there was a strong pressure to not wear a suit.
No, that's right.
And there's a pressure to behave, to have a hair thing.
No, that's
like
right.
The way you wear your hair, the way you. This isn't like a liberal or a left or anything. It's just in tribes.
That's right.
And academia to me, or a place, any place that dreams of having like renegade free thinkers, like really deep thinkers, should in fact like glorify the outsider, right?
Yeah.
Should welcome people that don't fit in.
Yeah. No,
that sounds weird, but I could just imagine an interview at Princeton. Like I imagine why aren't you at Harvard, for example, or at MIT?
Yeah. Well, so look, I would love to. I haven't lectured at MIT, but I've lectured at Harvard. I've gotten to lecture at almost every place that wouldn't consider me for a job.
Yeah.
And I well, a few things. I'm lucky because I go to Princeton. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. And then 2 days later, I go to Skidmore, and I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. And they offer me a job later that day, which I declined for months because of the extraordinary pressure of my mentors, who right-mindedly felt that I wouldn't get much done there. But what they told me at Skidmore was, take your time. Show up for your classes and don't molest barnyard animals, and you'll probably get tenure. And I'm like, I'll show up for my classes. We'll talk about it.
That was the negotiation.
Yeah, I negotiated. I drove a hard bargain. But honestly, Lex, I feel I'm very committed to Skidmore because I was given tenure when our first terror management paper wasn't published. It took 8 years to publish. It was rejected at every journal. and I submitted it as like a purple ditto sheet thing. I'm like, here's what I've been doing. Here's the reviews. Here's why I think this is still a pretty good idea. And I don't know that this would happen even at Skidmore anymore. But I was very lucky to be given the latitude and to be encouraged. I took classes at Skidmore. That's how I learned all this stuff. I graduated, I got a PhD unscathed by knowledge. We were great statisticians and methodologists, but we didn't have any substance. And I don't mean this cynically, but we were trained in a method in search of a question. So I appreciate having 5 years at Skidmore basically to read books. And I also appreciate that I look like this 40 years ago. And my view is that this is how I comported myself. Other people, the guy I learned the most from at Skidmore is now dead, a history professor, Tad Kuroda. He wore a bow tie. And there's another guy, Darnell Rucker, who taught me about philosophy. And he was very proper, and he had like his jacket with like the leather patches.
Yeah.
But these guys weren't pompous at all. They were, this is the way I am. And I always felt that that's important, that somebody who looks at you and says, oh, what a stiff, he's probably an MBA.
Yeah.
Well, they're wrong.
Yeah.
And someone who looks at me, when I first got to Skidmore, other professors would ask when I'd be coming to their office to empty the garbage. They just assumed, I was in my 20s. They assumed I was housekeeping. I always felt that was important, that the students learn not to judge an idea by the appearance of the person who purveys it. And
yeah, I mean, that's, I guess this is such a high concern now, because I personally still have faith that academia is where the great geniuses will come from.
I do too.
And great ideas.
I love hearing you say that. I still, and it's one of the reasons why I'm really apprehensive about the future of education right now in the context of the pandemic. Is that a lot of folks, and a lot of these are Google type people who I don't, they're geniuses also, but I don't like this idea that all learning can be virtual and that much could happen. I'm big on embodied environments with actual humans interacting.
There's so much to the university education, but I think the key part that is the mentorship that occurs somehow at the human level. Like, I've gotten a lot of flack, like this conversation, we're in person now, and I've even with Edward Snowden, who done all interviews remote, I'm a stickler to in person. It has to be in person. Like, and a lot of people just don't get it. They're like, well, why can't, this is so much easier. Like, why go through the pain? Like, I've traveled, I'm traveling in the next month to Paris for a single stupid conversation nobody cares about, just to be in person.
Well, it's important to me. I honestly, I was like,
and thank you for coming down today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. But again, it's very self-serving.
Really,
I've enjoyed this. I knew I was going to, but it's not about our enjoyment per se. Again, at the risk of sounding cavalier, there are a host of factors beyond verbal that I don't believe can be adequately captured. I don't care how much the acuity is decent on a Zoom conversation. I feel, again, I felt within 5 minutes that this was going to be, for me, easy in the sense that I could speak freely. I just don't see that happening so easily from a distance.
Yeah, I tend to, well, I'm hopeful. I agree with you on the current technology, but I am hopeful, unlike some others, on the technology eventually being able to create that kind of experience.
Oh, I think
we're quite far away from that, but
Yeah.
it might be able. My hope is, I'm hopeful.
I was at Microsoft in Seattle, and I can't remember why. And no, I can't. That's how I'm in my early Mr. Magoo phase, and somebody there was showing us like a virtual wall where the entire wall, when you're talking to somebody, so it's life size, and
Yeah.
they were beginning to get the appearance of motion and stuff. It looked pretty.
Yeah, with virtual reality too. I don't know if you ever been inside a virtual world.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's I can see the future. It's quite real.
Yeah.
In terms of like a terror of death, I'm afraid of heights.
Me too.
And there's I don't know if you've ever tried. You should if you haven't. There's a virtual reality experience where you can walk a plank.
Yeah.
And you can look down and. Man, I was on the ground, like terrified. I was afraid. I was deeply afraid. It was as real as anything else could be. And I mean, these are very early days of that technology, relatively speaking. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to do with that. Same with like crossing the street. We did these experiments crossing the street in front of a car, and just being run over by a car. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's just that, yeah. So there is a rich experience to be created there. We're not there yet, but yeah. And I've seen a lot of people try, like you said, the Google folks, Silicon Valley folks try to create a virtual online education. I don't know. I think they've raised really important questions
Absolutely.
about like what makes the education experience fulfilling, what makes it effective.
Yeah, these are important questions.
And I think what they highlight is we have no clue.